Imagine this. Well, you're just living your life. It's 2025, right?
Yeah.
Internet's everywhere for everything. Work, talking to family, news. Then suddenly, blink, it's just gone. Complete digital silence. That's not hypothetical for, well, for millions in parts of Manipur, India. On June 7th, 2025, around 11:45 at night, 5 districts in the valley area, internet and mobile data just switched off. We've been really digging into what happened, looking at the events, sure, but also the complicated history behind it all and what it actually feels like, what it means when that connection just vanishes. It's a really layered picture, you know? You see the immediate sparks, the triggers, but also the much, much bigger context.
Right. And our goal here really is to help unpack all of that. We wanted to look at the official story, the reasons they gave for shutting things down, but then also connect those dots to the long-running tensions that have been simmering there for a long time. Ultimately, it's about understanding what it truly signifies when internet access, which feels so basic now, just gets taken away. We want to pull out the key points so you can grasp not just what happened, but maybe why it matters so much there.
Exactly. And as we went through it, a few things really jumped out. First, these bans, they're often presented like a solution, right? But what we kept seeing is they're treated more like a symptom of this much deeper conflict, not really a fix. Second, the cost. The real human cost on daily life is just massive, crippling even. And third, how effective is it really as a way to contain things? That's seriously questioned again and again. So, okay, let's unpack that night, June 7th, 2025. How did it start? So like we said, June 7th. Friday night, almost midnight, 11:45 p.m. Internet and mobile data services just cut off. 5 districts, Imphal West, Imphal East, Thoubal, Bishnupur, and Kakching, the core valley areas. And it wasn't just a quick outage. The initial order, 5 full days.
Yeah, and it wasn't random. This specific shutdown, it came right after these widespread protests that had kicked off earlier that same night in Imphal East and Imphal West. And these weren't quiet protests either. We're talking significant descriptions include things like burning tires, blocking roads, pretty forceful stuff.
Okay, so protests erupt. What actually sparked those protests? What was the immediate trigger?
That's where it points to a very specific event, the arrest of a key figure. This person is linked to Arambai Tenggol. Now, Arambai Tenggol is identified as a prominent Meitei organization. They're active in the region sociopolitically, so arresting one of their leaders, that was clearly a very sensitive move, and it seems to have been the direct trigger for the demonstrations that night.
Right, I see. So the authorities see this unrest, these protests, and their response is the internet ban. What was the official line? What reason did they give in the order?
The official justification, it cited fears about social media. The concern was that antisocial elements, that's the term they used, would use platforms to spread, harmful stuff. Things like images, hate speech, and hate video messages. The fear being this could incite more chaos, maybe escalate violence. They even pointed to the specific law they were using, the temporary suspension of telecom services rules from 2017, so a specific legal tool being deployed.
Okay. And if we look at that government perspective, what's the thinking behind it? What's the logic?
The logic seems to be that in a situation that's already, volatile, social media can just pour fuel on the fire. It spreads messages incredibly fast, misinformation too, and it can mobilize people very quickly, potentially turning something local into something much bigger, much faster. It's seen as an accelerant, basically. And importantly, the ban wasn't just your standard mobile data or Wi-Fi. They specifically included things like VSAT satellite internet access and VPNs.
Trying to stop workarounds.
Exactly, trying to make it pretty comprehensive. And they added a warning about legal action if people violated the ban, so they were signaling they were serious about enforcing it.
Okay, so that covers the June 7th event, the immediate context. But as we dug in, it just became so clear this wasn't a one-off, was it? This is part of a pattern in Manipur.
Absolutely. It's a recurring thing, these internet shutdowns, especially since the wider ethnic conflict really flared up. We saw details of earlier incidents, like back in September 2024, just a few months before this. There was another 5-day internet suspension then.
What was that about?
That one happened during student protests. They were demanding changes right at the top of the police leadership, the DGP and the security advisor. And that period also saw clashes, protesters and security forces, tear gas being used. It was tense.
Okay, so September 2024. Any others?
Yeah. Then just 2 months after that, November 2024, another big ban. That one started even broader, covering 7 districts initially. And it followed violence connected to a really tragic incident, the recovery of bodies in Jiravam. The allegation was that they were killed by Kuki militants. So very high tensions again.
Right.
And what's striking about that November ban is it wasn't just 5 days, it got extended multiple times. And even when they eventually eased it after a lot of public outcry about the disruption, it was only a partial restoration of broadband. It shows these things can drag on and have a lasting impact.
Wow. So, okay, you step back. June 2025, November 2024, September 2024. This keeps happening. What does that actually mean for you, the listener, if you're living there? What is the real human cost when the internet, which is so fundamental in 2025, just gets switched off repeatedly?
Oh, the impact is huge. It's pervasive. It's not like this is happening in, 1995. Life runs on this stuff now. Think about students. Online classes, gone. Education disrupted. Businesses, everything from like the smallest local shop taking digital payments to professionals trying to work remotely, it grinds to a halt. Communication, transactions, finding customers, all impacted.
Even essential services.
Yeah, hospitals too. They increasingly rely on digital records, on networks for communication. It causes real problems. We saw this highlighted back in that November 2024 ban. The Federation of Civil Societies Manipur, FOCS as they're known, they actually put out a plea. They talked about the crippling effect it was having on everyone, local entrepreneurs, professionals, students, even healthcare delivery.
Crippling effect. That's a strong term.
It is. And it hits the simple stuff, too. Things you don't even think about until they're gone, ordering groceries online, maybe, or just checking in, seeing if your family in another district is okay during a tense time. All of that vanishes.
It's interesting. There's an irony there, too, isn't there? The stated aim is to stop unrest, stop bad stuff spreading online. But if you shut down all communication, doesn't that risk pushing people out onto the streets? Because how else do they find out what's going on? How else do they express themselves? It feels a bit like, telling a teenager to put down their phone and just be quiet and expecting that to calm things down. It might do the opposite.
Exactly. And that's where you have to zoom out again and see the bigger picture. These shutdowns aren't happening in a vacuum. Manipur has been going through this period of, widespread and really tragic ethnic violence since May 2023. The core conflict, as it's described, is mainly between the Meitei community, who are the majority, mostly in the valley, and the Kuki-Zo communities, who live predominantly in the surrounding hills.
And the issues run deep.
Very deep, rooted in history. Disputes over land, arguments about political representation, who gets what in terms of economic opportunities. It's complex and long-standing.
And the human cost of that conflict itself is just staggering.
It really is. Since May 2023, the figures we saw suggest over 260 people have lost their lives. And thousands, tens of thousands really, forced to flee their homes. Displaced. That's the backdrop.
And we should probably add the political layer, too, that the state was under president's rule earlier this year, right? Central government control.
Correct. That adds another dimension. So when you look at that arrest, the Arambai Tenggol leader that kicked off the June 7th protests, it wasn't just some random event in a peaceful place. It was, someone described it as poking a hornet's nest.
Yeah.
Given the ongoing conflict, the existing tensions, the protests weren't just about that one arrest. They were clearly an outburst of deeper frustrations that have been building for over a year.
So the internet ban becomes a tactic, a tool used within this much larger, really difficult situation. It's framed as a containment strategy. But how effective is it really? What did the analysis suggest?
Well, the consistent view we saw is that it's questionable, especially long-term. It gets called a Band-Aid on a wound that needs serious surgery, or, other analogies came up like trying to cure a fever by just smashing the thermometer. It stops you seeing the symptom maybe, but doesn't fix the illness.
Or fixing a leak by turning off all the water.
Exactly that. It might temporarily stop one thing, the flow of information or misinformation, but it doesn't address the root cause, those deep ethnic divides and grievances. And meanwhile, it causes significant collateral damage to people's lives, their livelihoods, their ability to function.
So looking forward from that point in June, what were the possibilities? What might happen next?
Right. Well, the initial ban was set until June 12th, 2025. But given the pattern we saw, the chance of it being extended if things didn't calm down was definitely there. There was also some talk about possibly whitelisting certain essential services, allowing specific approved internet access. But how that would actually work, the details seemed pretty unclear. And obviously, security forces across the state remained on high alert, bracing for potential further trouble.
Okay, so if just turning off the internet isn't the answer, if it's a Band-Aid,
Yeah.
what about the surgery? What kind of smarter solutions or alternatives were mentioned?
The discussion definitely pointed towards needing more fundamental approaches, not just reactive measures. Things like investing in real community programs, efforts designed to, build bridges, foster some understanding between the different communities in the valley and the hills.
Addressing the roots.
Yes, and shifting focus away from these blanket bans that affect everyone, moving towards more targeted law enforcement,
Yeah.
actually identifying and dealing with the specific individuals or groups who are inciting violence or spreading hate, rather than punishing the whole population by cutting off their communication.
Makes sense.
And crucially, dialogue. Genuine dialogue, listening to people's complaints, their grievances, trying to address the actual reasons for their frustration, instead of just silencing the expression of it.
That sounds much harder, though.
Oh, much harder, because that's the core challenge, isn't it? The internet ban is the blunt temporary tool, the Band-Aid. The real issues in Manipur, the deep ethnic tensions, the lack of trust, the economic gaps, the historical wounds that needs the surgery. It requires patient dialogue development that actually benefits everyone fairly, real reconciliation efforts. And as we see from, the slow progress in talks with groups like Kukizo Insurgents and the ongoing influence of groups like Arambai Tenggol, that's incredibly difficult work. It takes a very long time.
So reflecting on all this, stepping back from the details, what really strikes you? For me, it's just such a stark example of how technology, something we think of as connecting us, empowering us, can become this tool in conflict management, a really blunt instrument used by authorities, and seeing the ripple effects, how that choice hits every part of daily life, school, work, family connections for so many people, it's quite profound.
It really does highlight that complex, sometimes messy interplay, doesn't it, between these deep historical, social, and ethnic tensions, how political power chooses to respond, and then the critical, maybe even controversial role of information, of communication in our digital world. It drives home that this isn't just a technical problem about internet being on or off. It's tied directly to the stability, the economy, the basic well-being of an entire community caught in a really tough, ongoing cycle.
And that leaves us with a final thought, maybe for you, the listener, to consider. If turning off the internet is like trying to solve deep problems by essentially avoiding the conversation, what does it really take for a society to confront the roots of its conflict? Especially now when communication is so woven into everything we do, how we connect, who we are. It's just silencing the noise, however disruptive that noise might be.